Welcome back, looters. Today on Let's Make a Game, we're talking about demos. And that, in this case, means two things. Demonstrations and demographics. So I figured we could lump them together because I'm not entirely sure that we have enough information to do one video on each one of those things. So I figured we'd start talking about demographics, which is like, who do you want playing your game? Who is most likely going to buy your game? And then we can move to demonstrations, which is showing off your game to people and letting them play it. Who's your core demographic?
People who like serial killers.
Your core demographic is going to mostly, I think, be based on the level of difficulty of your game, with theme being secondary. If your game is very, very heavy and strategic and has a lot of planning involved and a lot of thinking ahead in terms of moves, it's probably not going to be a family game. Probably not going to be for 8-year-olds. Your demographic is going to be slightly older people. It's going to be people who enjoy heavy games. That being said, when we talk about demographics for board games, it's not the same as demographics for like TV shows, where it's like boys or girls, men or women, this specific age group. Board games are a little bit more expansive in terms of their demographics than that. It's going to be like people who enjoy lightweight games, people who enjoy heavy strategic games, family games, people who like this particular genre. So if your game has a lot of deck building aspects, it'll be people who like deck builders, things like that. And so keeping in mind how you are marketing your game to show it off to those people. If you have a lightweight family game, don't brand it to be, oh, it's a super serious sci-fi game, because families, little kids, aren't likely to see something that's like hyper realistic sci-fi and be like, oh, this is a game I want to try. Keep it lighter in terms of the theme. With all that being said, if you are not going to Kickstarter, do not worry about the theme. If you are pitching it, we've already talked about this, but if you're pitching it to a publisher, they're probably going to change the theme anyway. So, if you're worried, oh, this is my lightweight game, but it has a sci-fi theme to it about building space stations, maybe that's fine. Maybe, when the publisher goes to make art for it, they can find like a Baby's First Spaceship kind of art style where it's like bright colors but still sci-fi, and like that's something they want. Or they'll look at your game and be like, this is great, and we're going to turn it into a circus theme because we don't have a circus theme, or because we already have a line of games involving zoos. I have a hard time coming up with themes off the top of my head.
You already heard my pitch.
Yeah, I'm aware. So, if you have a family game, if it's lightweight, you're aiming it at families, don't go with a serial killer theme. That's going to be a hard sell. So keep those two things in mind as you're designing, and if you are looking to pitch it to a publisher, just know it will probably change anyway, so don't worry too much. You might not even really come up with a theme yet for it.
Well, abstract games don't even have themes.
Yes, that's true. Abstract games are games that are really just the gameplay. Think like chess, where it's really just the gameplay and it doesn't tie into any sort of theme, even if there is a theme. You can put some pretty pictures on it, but it doesn't have to relate to the gameplay itself. Yeah. That's fine. It's sometimes a little bit harder to sell, because people sometimes will want that experience if it's like cats. If your tiles or whatever have cats on them, people will be like, oh, I wanted it to relate to cats more. But some people will just buy it if it looks fun and if it has good art, and you may not have to worry about it.
And there are some players where theme is very important.
Yes. And then there are some players whose theme is not important at all, and so you don't have to worry about it. So it really just depends on your game in terms of that. So on the flip side, how do you know if this is in fact your core demographic and if these people are enjoying your game? Playtesting is really what we kind of have done with the answer. Potions and Puppies started as sort of a generic fantasy theme with potions, and a lot of people were really enjoying the game but weren't really our core demographic, which was families or like people who wanted a lighter weight game. And people were coming who clearly wanted a heavyweight 3-hour game, and I was like, this is not the person who is going to buy my game. My game is going to be like on the cheaper end, not have a ton of pieces, like be more of a self-contained experience. So changing the theme to be generic fantasy to magical dogs really helped people identify, oh, this isn't going to be a 3-hour dungeon crawl with mini bosses and side quests and splitting up the party and it's a D&D board game. This is going to be something a little bit lighter weight. We can get through this in 45 minutes working together. So if people are coming and are interested in your game but aren't who you consider to be the core demographic, you can consider changing your theme, or less likely changing your game depending on how far along you are. If you're kind of at that crossroads area and you're deciding, oh, I mean, I could turn it into a 3-hour dungeon crawl. Maybe you want to do that if there are a lot of people who are really interested. That's really up to you at that point. What are your feelings on this?
Well, when we came to that statement, my feeling was that's just a different game. As in, later, there's nothing stopping us from making the 3-hour dungeon crawl based on where we were at that moment. There's nothing stopping us from later, from making this game now and then later making that game.
Right. We still have all those notes from back in the
We have all those notes.
Then.
We have all those thoughts. We're like, hey, that'd be kind of cool. And we kind of have like side quests. And we have all those whatevers. There's nothing stopping us. But at that moment, we just needed to get this little thing out. Like, finish up the little thing before you work on the
big thing. Totally. So, if you are building a brand, also keep in mind, if you have an idea for that brand, Loot and Loot is very based on cooperative, narrative, imagination, kind of family friendly to a certain degree. So to us, we didn't really want to start with a 3-hour game that has, death mechanics and all of these things. Like, that to us was not really the direction we wanted to go at that moment. So for us, it made more sense to keep it lightweight and re-theme it to be more cute dogs.
Yeah.
But you may be the other way. You may want to focus on like war gamers or like heavy strategy games and be like, oh, a bunch of 12-year-olds really want to play my game. That's not who I'm really making games for, and maybe tweak it to go the other direction. Or maybe you want to get both and sort of have like two options where like you can play a lighter mode or a heavy mode, which is harder to do. So I don't suggest starting with that. But
I wouldn't go there. The other half of the problem with that is, like I just said a second ago, then just make 2 games. I mean, because then you're not doing a good job for either of them. You're not committing either way, and so in the end, you're not making a great of either of them, as opposed to just making 2 separate great games.
Right. Oh, I see you noticed my my Hello Kitty Ramune. If you're interested where this came from, click on the link above for our Sanrio unboxing video.
We're still not sponsored by Sanrio. It's been 15 minutes. I don't know how come we haven't got a sponsor.
I just needed something to drink.
Do watch and make sure you are targeting the correct demographics. I particularly like to play games about killers.
Yes.
I'm sure you didn't know that. I'm sure I've never mentioned it before.
It's new information for everyone.
And so for me, it really bothers me when I find a game, I pick up the game, I look at the game, and be like, oh my gosh, it's going to be about a killer. Is he going to chase me? I want to be the killer. Okay. So, and then I will go and I'll get up to, and then it'll say something like social deduction game. And I'll be like, or trick-taking game. And I'll be like, so the point is, make sure the theme matches the game. That it...
And maybe, you know...
What are you trying to draw? What are you...
We don't like social deduction games. And maybe you're thinking about making a social deduction game, and that's okay.
Do not make it about killers.
Kari specifically is calling you out if you make it about being a killer.
But if you are making a horror game in which...
Horror game. Not a horror game.
In which
horror.
Anything bad happens to lots of people, lots of dark, lots of mood, contact me. Please tell me. Tell me when it's going to Kickstarter.
So I guess the takeaway from that is just, well, so if you are making a game about serial killers and you think it really fits with a social deduction gameplay, I would say just make sure that when you're demoing it, make sure that everyone agrees that this theme and this mechanic really go well together. Because maybe it does, and we just don't like that kind of game.
Well, but no, for me,
just because what you have is a preconceived idea of a game does not mean that that is not allowed to be a theme for that kind of game.
But
you just want to run around.
Even if it's going to be about killers or whatever, well, I'm perfectly acceptable with that. So, but on the same token, social deduction about killers, great. But then the box art and everything needs to be more driven towards the concept that this is a social deduction game, and less about the fact that it's going to be...
Someone's going to chase you with a knife.
Yes, that's what I want. That's the game I want.
Okay.
Chase me with a knife. That's
if it looks like it's going to be a game that involves some sort of, chase mechanic or
stalking is good.
Sort of, I don't want to say roll and move, but some sort of mechanic where you're moving.
Roll and move.
Listen to my words. If there's some sort of mechanic where your character is moving across a board to hide in cabins or set traps or do things that make you feel like you're actually in a movie about serial killers, like your Friday the 13th or whatnot.
Contact me. I need to know what it's called.
Make sure that your box art reflects what kind of spirit your game is trying to put forward, because if it's a social deduction game, maybe it's someone wearing a mask and not chasing someone is what you're trying to get at.
That is where I'm very badly trying to get at. And if you happen to have a game that is about being chased or chasing across dark cabins, please let me know.
If you have any suggestions for Kari about games where she can play as a serial killer, please put it in the comments below.
That Kari doesn't read.
I will share them with her.
I'm the worst.
You are the worst. So that was demo number 1, your demographics. Next we're going to be talking about demo number 2, demonstrations. What is a demonstration? Showing people your game and letting them play it. Showing it off. So demonstrations for us normally is, I don't want to say play tests, but people playing your game at conventions to kind of get a feel for whether or not they like it. It can also be showing it off to publishers if you want to sell it to them. Either way, I feel like it's very similar in you're trying to sell your game and you want to do the best job of setting it up for these people to really enjoy playing it, to really enjoy probably the first time they're, and maybe the only time they're ever going to play this before they decide whether or not to buy it. And last time I said something about stacking the cards. That's where you do this. we started doing this during like actual play testing, like after we had finished the gameplay. Gameplay was done, so we did not need to make sure that that was solid anymore. We know it's good. We're good to go. Now we're working on things like card graphics and making sure that the nitty-gritty little details are working good and look good, and make sure that people like those things. And in that case, you don't want the game to take forever. You don't want people to go through, in Potions and Puppies, there's 3 copies of each potion and 8 potions, so 24 cards. And this one group could not find the one potion that they needed to move on. And, you know, this was their first time playing. They don't have all the in-depth puppy strategies in mind yet. So, like, trying to help them a little bit kind of is helping, but at the same time, they just need this one potion. And they were all clumped up at the bottom because whoever shuffled either did a really good job or a really bad job. And it's no one's fault, but it makes those players not enjoy it as much as they could. And that's really detrimental to the whole experience of like, this is my first interaction and this is not normal behavior for the game. So how do you do that? It's by stacking the deck. And so for us, for me at least, I normally stack the first like 4 cards of the potion deck to make sure that they're all different and to make sure that they're things that help the players. And so when I reset after every group of players, I just make sure those top 4 cards are stacked like that, and the rest of it just goes back to the way it was. So there's always some random chance. It's not like they're playing a completely stacked game where, you know, they're going to hit the right thing every time. There's still a chance that they fail, but they'll fail at the end when they're close, as opposed to at the very beginning where they feel like, oh, I just wasted 15 minutes of my time because, like, we didn't even make it past the second card.
And you want, so the demo needs to be set up in such a way that it's going to be the most interesting to the group of people who are going by. It needs to not be at the beginning of the game when it's really boring and you have to kind of
Unless it's a very short game.
Right. And you don't want it to be at the end where it's all intense. You want to have it be just in the middle. Set it up there and assume that every person is only going to play for 5 minutes. So what is the most interest? So to give the person
the
going
best
by
5 minutes of the game
and
experience.
The best sense of what the game is about and what the game is like. So because they really aren't going to want to spend more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, if people are at a convention,
walking by,
they probably only have time for 5 to 15 minutes before, oh, I need to go to this panel, or oh, this booth just opened up and I need to go get a pin from there, or whatever they're doing. You probably aren't going to have their undivided attention.
No.
So, like Kari said, if you have a mid-size or a large game, don't give them that boring leading up stuff where you're gathering resources. Start off everyone's hand with those good resources so that they feel like, oh, I could do this or this, and they have some decision-making capability immediately.
But tell them you started the game in the middle. So you can be like, listen, you previously, I'm going to go ahead and hand you these resources, but previously you would have been gathering the resources.
Right. And that's really important too. Talking about how to teach people your game, I think, is the number one important thing in selling your game. You already have your quick pitch of like, hey, you want to play my game? It's about necromancers in space. And people are like, oh my God, I want to play that game. So you have people at your table now. How do you teach them your Necromancer space game in 5 minutes to keep their attention. And so you're going to start with your broadest statement, which is, okay, you're a necromancer in space and you're going to raise skeletons to capture other spaceships.
Xenomorphs.
So that's like, this is the thing you're doing, and you win by taking over all the other spaceships.
Killing all the people on board. I got it.
Then you're going to go down a step to how in game terms do you do that thing. You're going to raise your skeletons by using your magic points, and magic points you get by gathering magic from dark holes, black holes. I don't know. I'm just completely pulling this out of nowhere. So you're gonna start with, theoretically, like the story, what you're doing. Then you're gonna give them a sense of how to accomplish that task in the game by using the mechanics you've set up. And then, personally, depending on what kind of game, I would break down like the turn structure. So like, on your turn, you can do this or this, or this, this, and this, however your turn is set up. And then at the end of everyone's turn, we're going to do this thing, and that's a round. And so if your game has like multiple rounds, you want to give people kind of a sense of what they're going to be looking forward to. So that if you have something at the end of the game where it's like, oh, and at the end of the game, the black holes all collapse. So if you're right next to a black hole, you're going to die. Don't let them not know about that, because if someone is like, oh, I get all my energy from black holes, I'm just going to sit here, and then they die because you forgot to tell them black holes collapse at the end, they're going to be really mad. So, like, don't do that. Make sure everyone kind of has broad strokes, even if you can only describe it later. Be like, and black holes are really dangerous, so you don't want to stay there too long, and I'll tell you more about that at the end of the game. But just, like, keep that in mind so that people are, like, looking out for things. And remember, you only have like 5 to 15 minutes, so don't overload it, but give people like really broad strokes. And then you'll have them play a little bit, whatever the most interesting part is. And then depending on how long you have those people for, you can go to the end of the game or just end it right there, depending on your sense of what's going on. What would you say?
I was just wondering, is it interesting to jump to the end and let them see what the finale is, or is it more interesting just to tell them how it would have ended?
And that I would say is up to you, the game designer. If the ending is really spectacular and has visual appeal, absolutely show it off. If you're like super proud of that, and even if it's not built all the way up, if that's a selling point, you want to show it off. If it's kind of lackluster and it's just like counting a bunch of things, do not bog them down with it. They'll be invested when they actually play, but if they haven't had that time built in to become invested, you don't want them to be like, oh, and then at the end we count a bunch of stuff. Ooh. So I would say you have to use kind of your best guess. But here's the other thing. You need to practice. Which sucks. Nobody wants to practice talking in front of other people, especially board gamers. Some people do, I'm sure. That's a blanket statement. But, like, we don't. I know a lot of people who don't. So practice in front of your friends, practice in front of stuffed animals, practice in front of your relatives on Zoom. Like, do whatever it is you can to practice that pitch and talking, because we had to kind of learn on the fly, and it's rough, and people are really understanding, so no one's really going to be mean to you about it, but like, you know, if you're not doing a great job or doing your best. And a lot of times I get tongue-tied because I get really nervous. I get really nervous talking in front of you guys, and I can't even see you. So you're just a camera. You need to make sure that you have at least the main beats of your pitch down when you're demonstrating it to people. Otherwise, you know, especially if you're selling it, if you're just playing with people and you just want them to kind of see your game and get it out there, you know, no one's gonna judge you for maybe not being quite as on point as you could be, but like, if this is your one and only chance of selling your game to this company that's like a perfect match, you're probably not going to get a second chance. So take some time, practice it, however works for you. If it's in front of a mirror, like I said, in front of your gaming group, other publishers that you've been hanging out with and talking to, however works for you, just do it and get it over with. And once you do it, you kind of, I don't want to say that I have a script, but like there are certain things that I always say now, and it's just like, it puts me more at ease to know like I have these kind of joke moments or these things that I can say that I know people understand, and it makes it easier as you go along once you develop those sort of phrases.
I just need to practice.
Yeah. Where do you do your demonstrations? Where can I demo my game?
Everywhere.
Everywhere and anywhere.
The beach, parking lots.
When we get to a place where conventions are things again, normally most board game conventions will have areas like unpub, nunpub, those groups we were talking about before, where they will have a specific section for playtesting your game. And all you have to do is go onto their website and like sign up for a table. Sometimes there's like a small fee for making sure that you can secure that table, just so they make sure people don't sign up and then ditch them. And that's totally valid and probably a really good way of getting a lot of foot traffic and people expecting to come and play a unpublished game. There's also the option, which is a little bit more sketchy, not necessarily in a bad way, but just like not as professional, which is you just find a spot where there is a table and it's not being used for anything, and you set up your game with a little sign, and you just like carnival barker at people like, hey, you want to play a game? Come on over. And some people don't like that. Like if I was walking by and someone was like, hey, you want to play my Space Necromancer game? I'd be like, I mean, kind of, but I don't know you. So you got to feel out the space, I guess.
Not all con halls are great for that also. So
Yeah.
some con halls, so many people and so many tables that unless you're in one of the main thoroughfare of the tables,
people may just
you
not
will
see
never
you.
see them. Because
We had,
if you're one table over,
yeah, we were kind of in the middle.
You're not there.
We were kind of in the middle, and we had this huge cone. It was like giant, and Kari was like waving the cone around, and we're like, "Hey, come play our game." We got one group to come and play our game.
The big,
and it was just it's a tough sell.
Rough. And the big problem is because every person knows what kind of game they're looking for, but when all you see is a sea of games, you can't tell that I'm only looking for a family game, and all you see is strategy games, because in this sea of strategy games, in the back, in the corner, is this one little family going, please play me. And meanwhile, see what I mean? It's like, it's not set up in such a way that it's easy for the person to go into it and find the kind of game they're looking for.
Right. And clearly they're trying to do their best in terms of having a little system where you can see what games people have said they're looking for players for. But if you don't know to look for that, or if you just are on your way in between things, and maybe if something catches your eye, you'll stop, but you're not going to go out of your way.
Yeah.
It's just harder, you know?
Harder.
And so...
And you're having to determine which games to play just based on the name. And you know...
And maybe the board presence, if you can see it.
Yes.
And if your game is unpublished, maybe you're not at the point of having dedicated graphics yet. In this series, we're not at that point of even talking about art yet. So you probably don't have art done, or if you do, it's not fully completed, or you don't have the graphic design. So even if you have the art, it's not in a finished card. And that's fine. Like, you don't need to be there yet. But we just wanted to talk about showing off your game before you feel necessary to invest that money. Because by the time you invest that money, like, we're in it to win it. And there's no going back at that point. Unless you're one of those people. And we'll talk about that next time, where people invest a lot of money in art and then decide that that's not the direction they really want to go in. And we will talk about why that's not a life choice for us. But before you buy art, please make sure you test and you play test and you demo, and we exhaust all of those options of making sure that this is the right theme, this is the right name, this is the right graphic design direction that we want to go in before you spend a lot of money. Because ain't nobody got time for that. Next week, I thought we would talk about conventions and what conventions used to look like.
I haven't been to one in so long. I don't remember those things you called the convention.
It's been so long.
It's been so long since you referred to these things that you call a convention. Are you sure they exist? They might be mythical.
So we'll talk about what conventions used to look like, what we're doing to plan for upcoming conventions in terms of making sure that we are safe around people and making sure those people are safe while still having a fun experience.
We'll post a list of which conventions we plan to go to and kind of when, just so that, so you can stalk us. That's always important. But but also, the other reason why is because there might be conventions out there you just didn't even know about. It is entirely possible that we're going to post to the convention and be like, we're going to go to this particular convention in Bellevue, Washington, and your response is going to be, I live in Bellevue, Washington.
I didn't know
there's
about
no
a
convention in
there.
Bellevue, Washington. And we'll be like, are you kidding? There's a good one in Bellevue, Washington.
It is one of our favorite conventions.
So
not sponsored by OrcaCon, but we could be.
And that actually happens, where people will be like, there's no convention. We'll be like, yeah, there is. There's a convention here. Yeah. It's 2 weeks from now. What do you...
If there ever is a convention that we're going to that you are going to also, feel free to stop by, say hey. If there's a game that you're demoing, let us know, because we might be interested in playing it. We probably are interested in playing it.
Does it have necromancers?
Space necromancer game. One of you needs to make it, otherwise Kari's going to want to make it. Don't do that to me. So next time we'll talk about conventions, and then after conventions we will talk about art. Bum, bum, bum. The nightmare that is getting art. Making art direction, making mood boards, finding an artist, keeping contact with that artist, contracts, all of this stuff. There's a lot of stuff to talk about with art. Art may be 2 videos long, honestly. It's a lot. Thanks for watching. If you have any more questions about demographics or about demonstrations, let us know in the comments below. As always, please subscribe to our channel, because we are just 2 people doing our best. And it means a lot to us for each one of you who deems us worthy enough to have a subscription to our channel. To have a subscription. It makes us feel nice when you like our stuff, is what I'm trying to say. And obviously we're not scripted content, so it means even more.
And not sponsored either.
We'll see you in the next one.
I know, not good stuff over here.
No.